Bears fans, coming up on today's show, Roquan Smith Trade Ideas, so stick around for that. But first, we're closing in on 50,000 subscribers, whether it's good news or bad news. We're going to have daily coverage here on the Chicago Bears, so go ahead and subscribe today. Hit that big red button. You see the numbers right there. We're just over 550 away. Help us get to 50K ASAP. And if you're a Bears fan watching on Chat Sports, our main YouTube channel, come over to youtube.com/BearsNow for daily Bears videos. Welcome into Bears Now. I am Harrison Graham. On today's show, we're going to get into some Roquan Smith trade ideas following the superstar linebacker requesting a trade on Tuesday. Now, let's be clear, they may not trade him, they being the Chicago Bears, but if they do decide to move on, I figured, okay, let's explore some trade ideas. There's kind of conflicting information out there on what his trade value could be worth, so we'll kind of explore that as well. But here's the latest on Roquan Smith. He did request the trade early on Tuesday morning saying, quote, "The new front office regime doesn't value me." Ryan Poles responded that afternoon after the Bears practice at FanFest at Soldier Field and says his intention is to sign Roquan. He feels the Bears trade offers have been fair. He even said that there's record-setting pieces in that contract for an off-ball linebacker. Two sides clearly are not on the same page, I think partially due to the fact that Roquan is operating without an agent. Now, I do want to say this before we get into those trade ideas. The Bears actually have leverage here. Roquan is under contract this year for his fifth-year option, and they've got the franchise tag at their disposal for at least for next year, if not for multiple off seasons. So if they really want to play hardball, they can say, okay, Roquan, we're not trading you. We're not signing you to an extension. Sit out if you want, but that's not going to help your value moving forward. Now, Ian Rappaport hopped on 670 The Score in Chicago to kind of talk about the whole situation, and they asked him what they think his trade value would be, and he had this to say, which I found interesting. "I would make the argument that he transcends position. You look around the league at some of these players that want a new contract, it's been a first-rounder and maybe more. From Tyreek Hill to A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, years ago with Jalen Ramsey, Laramie Tunsil. There's been plenty of deals for superstar players, non-quarterbacks, that included new contracts that are worth more than a first-round pick. We'll see what the value is, but for me, I'd say that's all within reach. I think it's going to be robust." Now, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler kind of talked to some league executives and said, I don't know if you could get a first for Roquan. So it's hard to say for sure. I think it does depend on the team. And I think for the Bears, the market could dictate everything. If they take calls and none of them are for either a win-now player or a young player that can help you win this year and in the future, they're probably not going to trade him. Like, you don't trade him for 75 cents on the dollar. This guy was drafted in the top 10. He's lived up to that. I think paying him is a better option and better value for your franchise than trading him for below market value. Will Roquan Smith get traded? Type Y for yes, type N for no. This will be the pinned comment on today's video, and after this YouTube ad break, we'll get into 5 Roquan Smith trade ideas. All right, trade ideas coming at you. 5 different teams that could trade for Roquan. Got to start with the Atlanta Falcons. You know why? Because our boy Ryan Pace is lurking. You know he's just licking his chops right now. The infamous photo here of him looking around the corner at Hallis Hall. He's like, yeah, Roquan's available. I will snag him. The amount of Bears players, former Bears players, that they have brought to Atlanta has been kind of astounding. Clearly, Pace has a voice in that front office, even though Terry Fontenot is the GM. In all seriousness, I do think that Pace is probably at least having conversations within that building like, hey, I drafted this guy. I know what he's all about. I think he could help us as we continue this rebuild here in Atlanta. So an interesting trade idea that I cooked up. Calvin Ridley, who is out for this entire season, keep that in mind due to the gambling issue, and a second-round pick next year for Roquan Smith. Now, if Calvin Ridley was playing right now, I think at best it would be a Roquan for Calvin swap. But considering he missed most of last year, opting to sit out with personal issues, and is going to miss this year, I think getting a second as well makes sense because there's risk on the Bears side not knowing what Ridley's mindset is going to be when he comes back next season. So who says no? Type CHI for the Bears, type ATL for the Atlanta Falcons. I feel like this is a fair trade for both sides. Let me know in the comments section on this trade. CHI for the Bears, ATL for the Falcons. Which team says no to this trade proposal that I cooked up for Roquan Smith? So that's trade number one, as Ryan Pace, is licking his chops to get our boy Roquan Smith, as he has signed every former Bear possible this offseason. Let's go to team number two, the Las Vegas Raiders, who have Champ Kelly in their front office, former Bears front office member. There could be that connection there working in the Bears' favor. We know that the Raiders are having an aggressive mindset this offseason. They went out and got Devontae Adams. They got Chandler Jones. They traded for Roquan Smith, yada, yada, yada. They've been aggressive this offseason trying to become a major contender. And I would argue, if you look at this linebacker depth chart, there's some young talent here, but Roquan would easily be the best off-ball backer that they would have. Now, again, I think with any Roquan Smith trade, any team that's trading for him has to determine how much they value off-ball linebackers. Some value them more than others, which I think could make this tricky for the Bears. But, again, the Raiders have been all in this offseason. You want to get another win-now, all-in piece that also helps you in the future? How about 25-year-old Roquan Smith? It's not like he's young. He is definitely still improving as a player. He is not flatlined at this point in time. And also, the Raiders could use an offensive tackle. How about Teven Jenkins, who has had his own issues this offseason between himself and the Bears? First and a fifth for Roquan and Teven Jenkins. Mitchell Renz would laugh in my face, but if you're trying to go all in right now for the Raiders, I think this would be an all-in type of move to help them this season. Be sure to follow us on Rumble, both on Bears Now, which is rumble.com/Bears Now. You can also go follow our NFL Daily channel, which is rumble.com/NFL Daily. Go check that out for more NFL coverage on Rumble, more Bears coverage on Rumble. Trying to get to 1,000 followers on our Bears channel and keep growing on NFL Daily. We have over 6,000 over there. So help us out. Go give us a follow on Rumble. Both of those links are in the description of the video. All right, trade idea number three, the Seattle Seahawks, who I think Jeremy Fowler reported, if I'm correctly, that they could be the most interested. Let me just first say this. Before you ask, DK Metcalf isn't happening, okay? Let's just get that out there. They just paid him. You're not going to pay him $23, $24 million a year, then flip him for Roquan Smith. That's just, I would be shocked if that happened. But could you get Tyler Lockett, who's 30 years old now, has a couple years left on his deal, and realistically, they're probably not going to want to pay him big money on a new contract, right? You just paid DK. You don't want to pay an aging receiver $15, $18 million or whatever per year on an extension as he gets older. Now, certainly, he is still a very productive player. 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, over 8 touchdowns. The last 4 years, the guy has, 36 touchdowns, 9 tutties per year. He's a very, very good player. But if he's attainable, I think that would be very, very interesting for the Bears. And if the Seahawks have determined that they aren't going to keep him long term, I think a bit of a swap, a Lockett and second for Roquan could make sense. Now, maybe it's more like a third or a fourth on top of Lockett. I don't think the Bears would do a straight-up swap because he's 5 years older than Roquan Smith is. But I think that a pick and a player could be in the cards if Seattle has determined they are not going to keep Lockett long term. All right, we've talked about a couple of receivers on this show, Tyler Lockett, Calvin Ridley. Who would you rather have? Obviously, Ridley wouldn't play this year for you. Type TL for Tyler Lockett, type CR for Calvin Ridley. If I knew that Ridley was going to be back to himself for sure when he does come back, I would have to go with him because he's younger, but the safer route would probably be Tyler Lockett. Get your votes in, TL or CR. Philadelphia Eagles next up here on my Roquan Smith Trade Ideas video. Now, let me just prelude this with the Eagles have never been a team that invests heavily in an off-ball linebacker, but they could use one. They really, really could use one. And like a couple of these other teams, they've been aggressive this offseason. They went out and got A.J. Brown. They're trying to put their best foot forward for Jalen Hurts to try and win right away. And I think they have a couple of players that maybe not be in their long-term plans that could help the Bears out, at least in the short term. So here's an idea. Jalen Reagor, who might get cut, TJ Edwards, who's a decent stopgap starter, but probably not a long-term piece there. I think he's on the final year of his contract, and a second for Roquan. Maybe it's a third. I don't know. I don't think Reagor has any trade value because I think he might get cut. Edwards probably a day 3 type of pick value, so you got to get something back if you are Chicago. So a second and a couple of okay, decent player in Edwards and unimpressive player so far in Rager, I think it could make sense. All right, final trade idea here. Carolina Panthers, who have a head coach who needs to win right away, a defensive-minded guy as well in Matt Rule. Okay, they also have a receiver in Robbie Anderson that before they traded for Baker Mayfield went on IG and basically said Baker sucks and I don't want him here. Now, maybe things have changed during training camp because obviously Baker is there now. But Anderson coming off of a down year, only had 519 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. Carolina has DJ Moore, so they've got other weapons. Could look to move Robbie Anderson, and he's a player that would actually help the Bears wide receiver room, I would say. I think he could help quite a bit here in Chicago, probably be a number 2 next to Darnell Mooney, if we're being completely honest. So maybe you give them Roquan Smith, get a legit player on that defense to help round out that group, and the Bears get a receiver and a couple of picks back, 2nd and a 6th for Roquan as well. So there you have it. 5 trade ideas for Roquan Smith. I think the biggest key here is what is his value truly going to be? Usually we have a pretty good feeling on these things. I think some conflicting reporting and thoughts out there on what his market is going to be if he does get traded. All right, so where is Roquan going to play in 2022? Type B if you think it's still going to be with the Bears. Type O for other. If you want to overachieve, let us know on a team down in the comments that you believe Roquan could play for this season. All right, appreciate everybody for tuning into today's show. Please subscribe to the channel if you want daily Bears videos. It is free, youtube.com/BearsNow. If you're watching on our main chat sports channel, subscribe over there. And if you love the Bears, come over here, youtube.com/BearsNow. I am Harrison Graham. We will see you soon here on the channel.